So Black Clover is returning. It's been 4 months since the last chapter of Black Clover, when Black Clover decided to switch from Shonen Jump to Jump Giga, which a lot of us didn't even know existed until Black Clover decided to switch. Now, for those of you who have been living under a rock for the past 4 months, Jump Giga is like Shonen Jump, but instead of your manga releasing weekly, it releases quarterly. But Nick isn't a weekly release, kind of like a quarterly monthly release? It is. But we're not talking quarterly monthly, we're talking quarterly yearly, which means we get a new chapter of Black Clover every 4 months. Now, I'm not upset about that because the mangaka's dealing with some family health issues that he has to take care of, but boy oh boy, have I been fiending for Black Clover. But there is inherently an issue with releasing your manga every 4 months, and that's my goldfish brain. See, I guess I'm probably in the upper percentiles of anime and manga readers when it comes to sheer volume, and therefore my perception of this may be a little different than your average casual reader, but boy oh boy, if you give me 4 months between chapters, I'm gonna fill my head up with everything else. Undead Unluck, One Punch Man, Chainsaw Man, JJK, Boruto, everything. My god, Kagurabachi. And therefore, over the course of 4 months since new content has come out, I can pretty much forget everything about a manga. However, fortunately for Black Clover, it's one of my favorite mangas of all time, and therefore I do remember a good amount of what's going on. And, you know, considering the fact that I just reread the entire arc, I completely remember everything that was going on. However, I believe that I'm most likely not alone here. 4 months is a long time to go without any new Black Clover content. And with a new chapter coming out in a grand total of 2 days, I figured it was best if I did a rundown of everything that recently happened to the Black Clover manga to get you as caught up as possible for our next 28-ish page chapter coming out on the 25th. Yeah, it's only 28 pages, but I've heard there's a bunch of double page spreads, so maybe it'll be good. But we have a saying in this household, length doesn't matter, it's how you use it. Not that Captain Red Rocket here knows anything about that. We cut his balls off. And thus, since Black Clover is making some semblance of a triumphant return, I figured I would do my best job to get re-caught up on everything that was happening to make sure that you can enjoy this chapter coming out on Christmas as much as possible. Because today, we're talking everything you need to know before Black Clover's manga return. But before we start today's refresher course, guys, please, for me, like this video, subscribe to the page, and hit that noti bell. And if you like the idea of me keeping you abreast on all things anime and manga, then go ahead and follow my anime podcast, Taku's Anonymous, where me and Danny Mata break down everything that happened in anime and manga this week. It's available on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. Or if you want to look like somebody who keeps up to date with all things anime and manga, guys, go ahead and meander on over to my merch store, takusanonymous.net, where you can pick up some of the greatest anime t-shirts, sweatshirts, and sticker packs known to man. So, 4 months with no Black Clover. How have we all made it? Mostly because JJK has been really good in those 4 months. But a couple of months ago, we were in a spot where JJK, MHA, and Black Clover were all in their final battles simultaneously. And boy oh boy, weren't those a couple of weeks. But while MHA and JJK have continued on with their final battles, Asta, the Black Bulls, and Yuno have all been stuck in stasis for the last 4 months, making absolutely no progress towards the end of their respective story. And while unfortunately at a release schedule of one new chapter that's only 28 pages long every 4 months, we might have to wait years until we see the end of Black Clover, we are objectively very close to it. As Asta, the Black Bulls, all of the captains from the Clover Kingdom, and Yuno are all engaged in combat against Lucius Sagratis, also known as, more likely than not, barring some kind of Kaguya situation, the final bad guy of Black Clover. But how do we get to this final battle? How is it panning out? Has anybody gotten a power up? And who are the participants? Well, we're gonna answer all those questions and more, but first, let's start this video off in the way that we tend to start these kinds of videos off, by answering the easy questions. And the first and easiest question is, what's going on in Black Clover? Well, there's currently an all-out battle going on in the Clover Kingdom, and that battle is between Lucius Sagratis, his paladins, and the entirety of the Clover Kingdom forces. But as it currently stands, as of the most recent manga chapter, a large amount of the Clover Kingdom's fighting forces are down and out, as the paladins created by Lucius Sagratis are by and large stronger than even the strongest captains from the Clover Kingdom. As we've seen paladins like Damnatio or Osier Silva absolutely destroy some of the highest level fighters that the Clover Kingdom has to offer, which has led a myriad of captains or other high-level fighters from the Clover Kingdom to defeat. Even some of the main characters of the story, the Black Bulls, have been handed defeat after defeat after defeat at the hands of Damnatio as a paladin. But why are the paladins so strong? Is it because they were made by Lucius Sagratis? Well, Sort of, but there's more to that. See, all of the paladins created by Lucius Zagratis have two different types of magic. You see, because the paladins have both the magical attribute that they were born with, like Damnatio's scale magic, which allows him to either amplify or minimize other people's magic, and on top of the magical attribute of the human inhabiting the paladin's body, they also have a purified devil living inside of them. And thus all of these paladins are able to not only use their human magical attribute, but also the magical attribute of the purified devil inside of them, which is why they're referred to as paladins, because they have these two magical attributes. Now, Lucius is able to create these paladins because he has soul magic. And thus when Lucius comes into contact with the devil, he's able to purify that devil's soul. Essentially, he's able to break down a devil into its bare components, thus objectively making the devil no longer evil and just kind of a magical attribute. Now, soul magic is the magical attribute that Lucius Zagratis was born with, as Lucius Zagratis was born into the 4 siblings Zagratis family. Now, if the Zagratis name sounds familiar, that's because the Zagratis siblings comprised the Dark Triad, and thus the Zagratis siblings without Lucius were the antagonists of the Dark Triad arc. However, at the end of the Dark Triad arc, when all of the other Zagratis siblings were defeated, this is when Lucius Zagratis was introduced. Now, Lucius Zagratis is the oldest sibling out of all of the Zagratis family members, and he has the 4th and most important magical attribute out of any of them, because the 3 Zagratis family members that comprise the Dark Triad had bone, blood, and body magic. Now, they all also had additional magical attributes because they were devil hosts, which allowed them to also have access to gravity, space, and curse magic. However, since they were only devil hosts to Lucifero, Beelzebub, and Megicula, those magical attributes weren't actually their own, and thus when Lucius consumed his 3 siblings, he was only able to get their human magical attributes, and thus Lucius was given body, bone, and blood magic, in addition to the soul magic that he was born with. Now, with these 4 magical attributes, Lucius is able to make entirely new bodies, as the soul, body, bone, and blood are all you need to make a human, and thus, so long as Lucius has magical power, he can continue to make copies of himself. And since these copies contain his soul, as he's able to use his soul magic to make every single copy as human as he is, not until you kill all of Lucius's copies can you kill him. But Lucius Zagratis is also the devil host for Astaroth, one of the original 3 ruling devils from the lowest level of the Tree of Queloth. And Astaroth has time magic, which is why Wizard King Julius has time magic, because Wizard King Julius and Lucius Zagratis are twin brothers, but they're more like a split personality, as they inhabit the same body. On top of this, after Lucifero manifested into the real world, the overworld, and was subsequently defeated by Asta and Yami and Noct, Julius sent one of his devils to receive Lucifero's heart so he could consume Lucifero's heart and get gravity magic. So all told, Lucius has gravity, soul, body, bone, blood, and time magic, which makes him inarguably the most broken person we've ever seen outside of Black Clover's most recent movie, which, mind you, wasn't canon. Now, like I already stated, Astaroth was one of the original leaders of the lowest level of the Tree of Queloth, also known as the last level of hell, and it was Astaroth, Beelzebub, and Lucifero that ruled over all of hell. However, presumably around the time that Lucius and Julius were born, Astaroth goes missing from hell, and it's at this point that Megicula takes over for Astaroth as one of the leaders of the lowest level of the Tree of Queloth. So cool, we now know who the bad guy is. Sorry, Dorothy took his brother to work today and he's incredibly clingy. So now that we know who the bad guy is and kind of what's going on in Black Clover, why is the bad guy bad guying? That is to say, what is Lucius Zagratis' grand plan? Well, Lucius Zagratis wants to kill everybody. Specifically, Lucius Zagratis wants to hit restart on the world. Essentially, Lucius believes that the world has gone too far down a dark and dreary path, and thus Lucius believes through his ability of having soul, body, blood, and bone magic that upon wiping out the entire population of the earth, he'll be able to bring back the mighty and strongest heroes to live in a utopian society that he'll rule over as the final Wizard King. That is to say, eugenics. Lucius wants the weak and the magicless and the cowardly gone, and he wants to lead over a world where only the strong get to survive. However, on top of this, because Lucius has the ability to bring back souls from the dead, which is how he was able to make an Asier Silva Paladin, one of his big talking points against the people trying to stop him from eradicating humanity is that those people will be able to spend time with the people that they've lost if they simply let him win, as the souls of the mighty isn't necessarily restricted to those who are alive currently. But really, no matter how you package genocide, it's always gonna be just genocide. And thus, nobody really wants that. Good job being morally correct, Black Clover. AOT didn't exactly nail that landing. And thus when Lucius starts spouting off these ideas about unplugging the world and plugging it back in, Asta gets real upset with him, and he enters his Devil Union mode and tries to battle against Lucius. And he does pressure him a little bit. However, Lucius, done with fighting against Asta, cuts him down and throws him through a space-time portal that eventually leads to him landing in the Land of the Sun, aka where Yami's from, aka just Japan. It always comes back home. And Asta spends like 10 or 12 chapters in the Land of Sun going through a mini training arc. And in the Land of Seven, he trains with a group of people known as the Ryuzen Seven, who are apparently way stronger than all of the Clover Kingdom captains. Japan always comes out on top, baby. But the Ryuzen Seven don't use magic in the same way as the Clover Kingdom. That is to say that they more focus on an application known as Zetten, which focuses around the usage of ki. Now, if you remember correctly, Asta doesn't have magic, but he does have ki, and magic and ki are totally different things. Until you know, Zetten, because Zetten is a principle practiced by the highest level of fighters in the Land of Sun, and it allows them to focus their ki into their limbs. And upon focusing their ki into their limbs, they're able to do a bunch of really cool things with it. Like, let's say hypothetically, I focused my ki into my arm, and then I did a slashing motion. I would release a slash of ki that would be able to slice. Or if I focus my ki into my arm and then punch, I would release a much stronger punch. Essentially, Zetten is reinforcement magic, and that's actually kind of how it's described. In essence, the best way to understand Zetten is that it's a way to turn ki into magical output. And once you feed your ki into your limbs, you're able to use those ki outbursts either with all of the power in one strike or all of the power split into a bunch of strikes. That is to say, let's say I put 100 ki into my right arm. I can release all 100 in one slash, or I can go 20 at a time 5 times. And thus Asta, by training in the Land of the Sun, kind of gets magic, as he's now able to transform his ki into magical output. Now I know what you're saying. You're saying, Nick, but Asta, as a swordsman having more powerful unarmed strikes, doesn't do all that much for him. And you're right. It kind of does it, but it also does, and we'll get into why in a second. But first, we're going to talk about the fact that Asta is not the only person who has recently upgraded in terms of power. Because while Asta did go to the Land of Sun and unlock Zetten and get way more powerful, the other two main characters of the story, Yuno and Noelle, also got much more powerful. Now, Yuno's upgrade is a bit more well known because it happened a little while ago. But Yuno's most recent upgrade was the recent realization that he was actually born into the Spade Kingdom's royal family. And thus, on top of having the 4-leafed grimoire with wind magic that he's had the entire story, Yuno has an additional grimoire from his Spade Kingdom side that also gives him access to star magic. Not to mention the Dark Triad arc, Yuno became a Saint Stage Mage, as he became so compatible with Sylph that he basically mastered spirit magic. So now Yuno has star, wind, and spirit magic. And while we've known this for a while, it's gotten a lot crazier, as one of the most recent things we saw Yuno do was first enter into combat against Lucius, and secondly release a mana zone so large that it covered the entirety of the Clover Kingdom. And that mana zone makes his allies stronger, his enemies weaker, and completely nullifies all usage of time magic. So yeah, it's pretty good, but those upgrades happened over time and made a little bit of sense. Unfortunately, that's not the case for Noelle, as in chapter 259, over the course of 4 pages, we saw that Noelle also got an absolutely insane upgrade. But what's that upgrade, Nick? Well, as we all know, in the Dark Triad arc, because Lolopeshka and Undine are separated, Undine eventually ends up with Noelle, which leads to Noelle in the Dark Triad arc also becoming a Saint Stage Mage. However, because Undine and Noelle don't like each other, Undine goes back to Lolopeshka as soon as it's convenient. Which means in the fallout of the Dark Triad arc, Noelle is no longer a Saint Stage Mage and is now much weaker than she was before. But don't worry, because there's a power-up on the horizon. See, because after Asta is defeated by Lucius, Noelle gets real sad and goes to the ocean, where she stumbles upon Kohana. Remember that mermaid from a couple arcs ago, the one who likes to sing and dance? And Kohana's telling Noelle all about the fact that there's this giant sea god that all of the mermaids revere as a god who's destroying the underwater temple. Because with the coming of Astaroth and all the high-level devils from the bottom of the Tree of Queloth to the overworld, the end is upon us. And thus with the end being upon us, apparently there's a couple of earth gods that decide that's their time to rampage. Kind of like Ragnarok, I guess. However, this sea god isn't just looking to destroy. This sea god's looking for an incredibly talented water mage to help it destroy. And thus in a matter of, once again, I shit you not, 4 pages, Noelle acquires a sea god. And its name is Leviathan, and it's incredibly cute. And once again, through this contract with a literal sea god, Noelle is now probably not only a Saint Stage Mage, but also probably higher than that, as she now has access to Valkyrie armor, dragon form, that she's using to battle against the reincarnated version of her mother, who recently just wiped out pretty much her entire lineage, and we actually don't know how that battle's shaken out yet. But enough about about those side characters, let's get back to the main character, Asta. So you're probably asking, how is Asta gonna get back into the fight all the way from the Land of Sun? Well, Vanessa and Dorothy fortunately go to the Witch King and beg her to help in the battle against Lucius. And the Witch Queen agrees to this, so long as either Dorothy or Vanessa step up as the next Witch Queen. And they do, so the Witch Queen now has a successor. So Dorothy, Vanessa, and the Witch Queen all work with Finral to make a giant space-time gate that Finral's able to go through to grab Asta from super far away, which is good because the bad guys are currently getting mopped. Almost the entirety of the Crimson Lions and parts of Miliona are currently disintegrating in a battle against a paladin. It's the guy who's like been the bad guy from the Dark Triad arc, and he was like responsible for summoning all of the devils from the bottom of the Tree of Quel'Tha. Cannot remember his name to save my life. Is struggling it out against Lucius and not doing super good. And all the Black Bulls are either spitting out blood, losing arms, or trying to hold their guts inside their stomachs in a battle against Damnatio, who once again now not only has scale magic, but also atmosphere magic. And fortunately, by learning Zetten, Asta has become way more powerful, and specifically against paladins. Because while Zetten is technically about funneling your ki into your limbs so that you can use stronger unarmed strikes, Asta used the principles of Zetten to figure a couple things out about his anti-magic. More specifically, Asta figured out how to coat things in anti-magic. Because through learning Zetten, Asta learned how to cut things selectively. Asta's now able to apply anti-magic to his demon slasher and cut selectively, which means that Asta is able to cut down a paladin and only attack the purified devil in said paladin, leaving the human part of the paladin completely uninjured. And thus, if Asta is able to slash a paladin with his demon slasher, he's able to free said paladin from Lucius's reigns. But let's not forget how Asta gets the demon slasher in the first place. See, the demon slasher, Asta's fourth sword, is actually just Yami's katana that Asta was able to apply anti-magic to, which showed us that Asta has the ability to apply anti-magic to things. And thus our prodigal son returns to the battlefield to fight against Lucius, with the help of the Witch Queen, Dorothy, Vanessa, and Finral. However, when Asta steps onto the battlefield, he sees that all of the Black Bulls are basically dead. And thus, instead of having the entirety of the Black Bulls die the second that Asta gets to the battlefield, the Witch Queen uses up all of her magic to put every single one of the Black Bulls into a blood cocoon. You know, like the blood cocoon that she uses to save Asta's life in, I think, like chapter 80-ish? Yeah, but times that by like 10. And thus, subsequently, this leads to the end of the Witch Queen's life, which is why she needed a successor. But just like that, every single member of the Black Bulls is good and ready to go. But they're about to get better, because outside of just learning Zetten, Asta picked up some other things in the Land of Sun, specifically from the Shogun, as the Shogun had realized that Asta had the ability with his Demon Dweller sword, the one that originally belonged to Leet, that since this sword required such an insane amount of magic to wield, since Asta had no magic, that Asta had the ability to absorb other people's magic into this blade and launch it as an attack. See, now usually the Demon Dweller would get all of the magic that it would need from its user, but since nobody outside of Leet had enough magic to use this sword, it was never used until it fell into the hands of Asta. So the Shogun gave Asta the idea that instead of absorbing other people's magic and firing it off with his anti-magic, that Asta should find a way to apply his anti-magic to other people's magic. And thus Asta, as soon as he joins the battlefield, combines the principles of the Demon Dweller and the Demon Slasher. That is to say that Asta uses his ability to apply anti-magic to things and uses his idea of enhancing other people's magic with his anti-magic to apply a form of anti-magic upgrade to every single one of the members of the Black Bulls. And thus, after saving Damnatio from his era as a paladin, Asta and all of his now newly clad in anti-magic friends in the Black Bulls are going to battle against Lucius. And oh yeah, Yuno's there as well. So all in all, Asta, the Black Bulls, and Yuno are battling against Lucius. Noelle in her new dragon form is battling against Osier, her mother. Marileona is battling against Scientist Guy, whose name I simply do not remember. And oh yeah, Yami's sister also came with Asta through the portal. So after all the battles, she's gonna get closure with Yami, as she believed that Yami was the one who killed her entire clan, but in actuality, it was her. And that's everything that you need to know about what's currently going on in the Black Clover universe. Where are you going? And thus, you're as prepared as possible for the upcoming chapter coming in on Christmas. But are you guys excited for this new chapter of Black Clover? Do you feel as though 28 pages isn't long enough? What are your theories about how Black Clover is gonna come to an end? Tell me in the comments below, and while you guys are down there, please, for me, like this video, subscribe to the page, and hit that noti bell. So yeah, it's time for a walk.